COVID could be the largest disabling event since polio. That's how some disability rights advocates are seeing the pandemic's potential long-term impact on society. People who'd fall into this category are suffering from long COVID. So that means having persistent symptoms related to COVID-19 beyond 30 days from the initial onset of the illness or last positive test. So far, more than 32 million COVID cases have been reported in the U.S. Some doctors estimate long COVID could make up about 20 to 30% of those cases. And joining us now are Martina Sherman, a shareholder at Dubofsky, Sherman, Kashiari Reynolds, PC, a law firm that works on disability benefits, and Dr. Charles Davidson, Vice Chairman of Clinical Affairs at the Department of Medicine at Northwestern. He also oversees the Northwestern Medicine Comprehensive COVID-19 Center that does work with people who have long COVID. Welcome both of you to Chicago tonight. First with you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Dr. Davidson, what are the long COVID symptoms that you're seeing, the most persistent symptoms here?
Yeah, so we're seeing a multitude of symptoms, which is why we stood up the Comprehensive COVID Center at Northwestern earlier this year. It was actually the second center in the country to do this. But the predominant symptoms we're seeing are dyspnea, so shortness of breath, particularly with exertion, fatigue, headaches, chest discomfort, chest pain, brain fog has been very common, lack of good concentration effort. All of those have been our most common symptoms that have occurred in the patients after 30 days.
And earlier today, Chicago Tonight did speak with someone that is experiencing long COVID symptoms, and he's debating whether or not to go on disability. Take a listen.
Just talking to other people that are experiencing the same thing, the information's not out there. And there's a lot of people that are struggling to get on disability. There's a Facebook group that I'm in, and there's numerous people that have reported that they're not very successful in getting on disability, getting the benefits they need. They're running into a lot of problems with it because what we're experiencing is not really acknowledged yet.
Martina Sherman, are you seeing a number of long COVID patients that, because of their symptoms, cannot work or continue their careers at this point?
Yes, definitely. And what's interesting is we've received a lot of calls, inquiries from people who are contemplating applying for disability, but our firm has yet to see a case of benefits that have been denied where a claimant is forced to appeal. Now, our firm doesn't do Social Security. We concentrate in private employee benefits. But we suspect that we're right on the cusp of a deluge of claims and sadly denials. But I'm not, it saddens me to hear what, the audio that you just played of the gentleman who's having difficulty getting information. And that's part of why we're here tonight, is to try and answer some of the questions and get information in the hands of the people that need it.
Right, that's why you're hearing. Dr. Davidson, back to you and back to some of these symptoms. Is there anything known about who they're impacting? I mean, if you had pre-existing conditions, are you more likely to get these symptoms? And then how long they may last?
That's a great question, because this looks very different than the acute syndrome of COVID, where we thought about it was more elderly people with comorbid diseases that were developing the acute symptoms of hospitalization, intensive care unit, ventilators. This has been predominantly a young population. The first 900 patients we've seen, the average age is 49, and 2/3 are women. And only the minority of these patients have ever been hospitalized. In fact, only about 5% were in an ICU, and only about 14% were actually hospitalized. So these are people that had mild symptoms that either went away and then developed secondary symptoms, or had mild symptoms that then progressed. But they were generally outpatients, which is very different than what we saw in the acute phase of this.
So not a big overlap between those that really struggle with COVID and those that are experiencing these long symptoms. Martina, you mentioned that private employers are playing ball here in granting disability, and you're worried about the Social Security Administration. They did send a statement saying, quote, "A person who has limitations resulting from COVID which have met or are expected to meet our duration requirement could be found disabled if their limitations equal a medical listing or if the combination of those limitations and vocational factors prevent them from working. Social Security's current disability policy rules are able to evaluate COVID-19 cases." What obstacles do you expect for people that apply for disability benefits through Social Security?
Oh, well, it's very interesting, the statement that you just provided, because practitioners have been waiting for the Social Security Administration to issue guidance advising of how they're going to be applying these durational requirements for COVID-19 and long COVID survivors. The Social Security Administration requires that a disabling impairment last 12 months, be expected to last 12 months or result in death.
And so we don't know if it would last 12 months at this point. There's just no data.
Right. The pandemic has only been in existence for 13 or 14 months. So there's a lot of unknowns. The other thing to keep in mind is that Social Security disability benefit proceedings are a lengthy administrative process. And these numbers are about 10 years old, but the last time that I'm aware that there were statistics conducted, something like 70% of initial applications for Social Security disability benefits were denied. And the people who were approved were people who had legal blindness or kidney failure, or cancer, terminal illness. And then at the second stage in the process, which is the reconsideration stage, 90% of claims are denied.
Wow.
And at the hearing stage, which can take 2 years to get to, it's more like 50%.
So this is a cumbersome process, and it doesn't portend well for COVID. Dr. Davidson, have you found treatments that have mitigated some of these symptoms or could eradicate them?
I think that's the good news, that many of these patients, although can return to work in a limited fashion, few hours a day, are gradually getting better. It may be slower than they anticipate, but they are getting better. We have relied primarily on therapies that we've used for other traditional lung diseases, incentive spirometry, inhalers, cardiac medications that prevent lightheadedness and dizziness. So we're relying on medications we've used for other diseases that have the same type of symptoms. There really aren't medications directed toward long haulers. In particular, most of the focus early on, remember, was on the acute illness. But we are seeing people getting better, and I think that's the part I'd like the people to take away from this. This is not necessarily a life sentence.
Some hopeful news there. Okay, very interesting discussion, and our thanks to Martina Sherman and Dr. Charles Davidson for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.